The thermometer on my truck read -20 when I turned off the county road and onto the long dirt drive that led to my ranch. The engine groaned the way metal does when it's pushed past comfort, and I didn't blame it. At temperatures like this, even silence feels brittle. This land had been in my family for 3 generations. Wide open pasture, a few weathered barns, and, most importantly, a self-contained power system my grandfather had installed decades ago after one too many winter outages. Solar, backup generators, independent lines. We didn't rely on anyone, and no one relied on us. Or so I thought. I had just stepped out of the truck, breath fogging the air, when headlights appeared behind me. Then another set. And another. By the time I reached my front gate, 3 vehicles were lined up along the drive. An HOA SUV I recognized, a county utility truck, and, confusingly, a police cruiser. That's when I knew something was wrong. A woman climbed out of the SUV, bundled in an expensive winter coat that didn't quite hide her irritation. Clipboard tucked under her arm. Confident stride, even on ice. I'd seen her once before at a county meeting, but never spoken to her directly. She didn't introduce herself. "You can't deny access," she said immediately. "This is a community emergency." I stared at her, the words taking a moment to register. "Access to what?" She gestured broadly, like the answer was obvious. "Your power system. The ranch infrastructure. It's considered shared under community provisions." That was the first time I heard the phrase community-owned applied to my land. Behind her, the utility worker avoided eye contact. The police officer stood off to the side, hands tucked into his jacket, watching carefully. No one looked comfortable being there. I kept my voice steady. "This ranch isn't part of any HOA." She sighed, the way people do when they think you're being difficult on purpose. "It's within the development boundary. That makes it community adjacent. And right now, homes are without heat. Pipes are freezing. People are at risk." I believed that part. At 20 below, everything fails eventually. But then she added, "So you'll need to cooperate." Cooperate. Not ask. Not request. Need. I asked the officer, "Why are you here?" He cleared his throat. "We were told there was a dispute over essential utilities during an emergency." I nodded slowly. "There is no dispute. This is private property." The HOA woman snapped her clipboard open. "According to our documents, the ranch was designated as shared-use land when the community expanded. The power system falls under that designation." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I asked, "Do you have a deed?" She hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. "We have community records," she said. "Agreements. Do you have a deed?" I repeated. The cold wind picked up, pushing snow across the ground in thin, angry lines. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear a generator humming steadily, mine. Warmth, contained and controlled. The officer shifted his weight. "Ma'am," he said to her, "if this is private property, we can't compel." She cut him off. "People are freezing." Then she looked at me again, eyes sharp now. "If you refuse, you're choosing property rights over human safety." That was the moment I understood what was really happening. This wasn't about paperwork. This was desperation. Their grid had failed. Their backup had failed. And someone, somewhere, had remembered the ranch that never lost power. The ranch that wasn't supposed to exist outside their control. The ranch they'd quietly labeled community-owned without ever telling me, because they never thought they'd need to. Until the cold made them desperate. I looked past them at my land, my lines, my system, built to survive exactly this kind of weather. Then I looked back at her. "No," I said calmly. "You don't get to claim what you ignored just because you need it now." Her face tightened. And that's when she said the words that changed everything. "Then we'll have to escalate this." At -20, escalation isn't a threat. It's a mistake. The cold didn't let up overnight. By morning, the temperature had dropped another few degrees, the kind of cold that makes wood creak and metal snap without warning. I woke to missed calls, voicemails stacked one after another, all from numbers I didn't recognize. By the time the sun crawled over the horizon, I already knew who they were from. The HOA hadn't slept. This ranch existed because my grandfather didn't trust systems that failed when you needed them most. In the winter of '78, a regional outage left half the county without power for 3 days. Pipes burst. Livestock froze. People learned the hard way that being connected didn't mean being protected. He built independent lines after that, installed redundancies, and taught my father to maintain them. When the land passed to me, nothing had changed, except the development that crept closer every year. Copper Valley Estate. That was the HOA's name. They arrived with manicured lawns, marketing brochures, and promises of self-sufficient infrastructure. What they didn't arrive with was resilience. I returned one call late that morning. The HOA president answered immediately, like she'd been waiting with the phone in her hand. "You need to reconsider," she said. "No greeting. No small talk. This is becoming a liability issue." "For who?" I asked. "For you," she replied. "If someone gets hurt because you withheld essential resources, that could be construed as negligence." There it was. The pivot. First, they'd claimed ownership. Now, they were implying responsibility. "You don't get to assign me liability for a system I own and you don't," I said. She exhaled sharply. "You're inside the community boundary." "That boundary exists on your website," I said. "Not on my deed." She changed tactics again. "We can compensate you." I almost missed the next part because of how casually she said it. "We can draft a temporary access agreement. Emergency use only." You'd be helping people. Helping people. Another loaded phrase. I asked her to email me whatever documents she thought supported her claim. She didn't. Instead, an hour later, 2 more vehicles arrived at my gate. A utility supervisor this time, and a man in a county jacket who introduced himself as an emergency coordinator. Still no warrant. Still no deed. They spoke carefully, emphasizing community risk, potential evacuations, frozen pipe. All real problems. All not mine to solve. When I asked who authorized their presence, the coordinator said, "The HOA requested assistance." Not the county. Not the state. The HOA. Pressure works best when it looks official. By afternoon, a notice appeared in my email inbox, an HOA bulletin sent to residents. My name wasn't mentioned, but the message was clear. A private landowner is refusing to cooperate during a weather emergency. Comments were disabled. That's when I pulled out my grandfather's files. Original plats. Utility permit. A letter from the county approving independent generation and distribution on private land. Nothing ambiguous. Nothing shared. The power system was legally isolated by design. I scanned everything and sent one email. To the county clerk, the utility commission, and the emergency management office. Attached were the records. No accusations. No commentary. Just proof. The response didn't come immediately. Bureaucracy never moves fast, except when someone has overstepped. Late that night, as the temperature hit its lowest point yet, headlights appeared again at the end of my drive. This time, they stopped at the gate and didn't come any closer. No confrontation. No demands. Just waiting. And that told me more than any voicemail had. They weren't confident anymore. They were hoping the cold would break me before the records broke them. But this ranch was built for cold. And so was I. By the 3rd day of the freeze, the desperation stopped pretending to be polite. The county responded to my email just after sunrise. Short. Formal. Careful. They confirmed receipt of my documents and stated that my power system was classified as private, non-municipal infrastructure. No obligation to provide access. No emergency seizure authority. Case closed, at least on paper. In reality, things were just getting started. An hour later, a truck from Copper Valley Estates parked on the public road outside my gate. A new face stepped out this time, A man in an insulated jacket with a contractor badge clipped to his chest. He didn't approach. He just stood there, staring at the power lines that ran across my property like they were a lifeline. I didn't invite him in. By noon, the HOA president showed up again. No police this time. No clipboard either. Just her phone and a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're forcing our hand," she said through the gate. "If pipes burst, if homes become uninhabitable, this will come back to you." I didn't raise my voice. "You're asking for access to a system you falsely labeled as community-owned." She flinched at the word falsely. "We made a good-faith assumption," she said. "You made a convenient one." The truth was finally surfacing, and it didn't look the way she'd planned. Residents were asking why the community, advertised as self-reliant, had failed so completely. Contractors were asking why emergency generators hadn't been maintained. And someone, somewhere, was asking why a private ranch had power when the HOA didn't. That's when the narrative shifted again. A rumor started circulating that my system was connected to the community grid. That I'd been benefiting from shared infrastructure while refusing to help in return. It was subtle, indirect, and effective. Enough doubt to make people angry without giving them facts to check. So I gave them facts. I posted the original permits publicly at the county office. I authorized the clerk to confirm, verbally and in writing, that my infrastructure was isolated and privately funded. I forwarded the county's response to the HOA board, not just the president, but every member listed. Silence followed. Then something unexpected happened. A resident knocked on my gate. She was bundled up, eyes tired, voice shaking, not from the cold, but from stress. She lived 2 houses down from the ranch boundary and had 2 small kids. No heat for 48 hours. She wasn't angry. She was scared. "They told us you were refusing to help," she said quietly. I told her the truth, showed her the records, explained the system and why it wasn't connected. She nodded slowly. "That's not what they told us." Word spreads faster in a crisis than any official statement. By evening, 2 more residents came. Then a contractor. Then a board member who wouldn't give his name. Each conversation chipped away at the story the HOA had built. The power failure wasn't an accident. It was neglect. And the ranch wasn't community-owned. It was convenient. That night, the HOA president left me a voicemail, her tone different now. Lower. Controlled in a way that sounded rehearsed. "We're willing to discuss a temporary agreement," she said. "With compensation. And recognition of shared responsibility moving forward." Shared responsibility. I deleted the message. Because I'd already seen what that phrase meant in practice. It meant blurred lines, future leverage, and permanent expectations. It meant turning a one-time emergency into a precedent. And I wasn't going to let desperation rewrite ownership. The cold hadn't broken me. But it was exposing them, every assumption, every shortcut, every lie they depended on. And soon, the exposure would reach somewhere they couldn't control. The call from the county came just before dawn on the 4th day. Not a voicemail. Not an automated message. An actual person. He identified himself as a deputy director from emergency management and spoke carefully, the way people do when they're choosing every word for the record. He confirmed what I already knew. The HOA's internal grid had failed due to deferred maintenance, an undersized backup system, and a critical error made during a cost-cutting upgrade the previous summer. In plain terms, they'd cheaped out and winter found them. What he said next mattered more. "There's no legal authority to compel you to provide power," he said. "But the HOA is asking us to mediate." Mediate, not enforce. That word told me everything. By mid-morning, the HOA president was back at my gate, this time with 3 board members and a lawyer I hadn't seen before. No police, no utility trucks, just people who looked exhausted and angry at the same time. The lawyer spoke first. He talked about temporary easements, emergency cooperation clauses, and mutual benefit agreements. He framed it as a partnership, A chance to support the community during extraordinary circumstances. I let him finish. Then I handed him copies of the county emails, the original permits, and the written confirmation that my system was isolated and privately owned. I pointed to one paragraph and waited while he read it twice. His shoulders dropped slightly. The HOA president noticed. "You told us this land was designated shared use," one board member said, turning to her. She didn't answer. Another asked, "You said the county would back us." Still nothing. That's when the room, really just the frozen air between us, shifted. Because desperation only works when everyone believes the same story. And that story was unraveling fast. One of the board members pulled out his phone. "Residents are asking why we never installed the second generator," he said. "Why maintenance funds were redirected." The president snapped, "Now is not the time." "It is," he replied. The lawyer cleared his throat and changed direction. "If you're unwilling to cooperate," he said to me, "the HOA may pursue civil action." I met his eyes. "For what?" He didn't answer. Because they didn't have one. The truth was unavoidable now. They'd labeled my ranch as community-owned in internal documents to pad their claims of resilience, to reassure buyers, to cover gaps they didn't want to pay to fix. They never expected a freeze this severe, or that I'd refuse quietly instead of panicking. And the freeze was winning. That afternoon, a stopgap shelter opened at the local high school. Pipes burst in at least 6 homes. The county issued a public notice advising residents not to rely on HOA infrastructure alone during extreme cold event. That notice didn't name names. It didn't have to. By evening, the HOA president called one last emergency meeting. I didn't attend, but I heard about it anyway. Voices raised. Accusations thrown. Questions she couldn't answer. Financial records that didn't add up. By nightfall, her authority was gone. Not officially. Not yet. But power doesn't disappear all at once. It leaks out when people stop believing. The next morning, a revised community email went out. This one was shorter. Carefully worded. It acknowledged miscommunications, clarified that the ranch was privately owned, and stated that future infrastructure planning would be reevaluated. No apology. Just retreat. I stood outside that morning, the air still viciously cold, and listened to my generator hum steadily, unchanged, unaffected. The ranch did what it had always done. Endure. They'd pushed as far as they could. Claimed what wasn't theirs. Applied pressure until it cracked. But pressure works both ways. And now, with the truth fully exposed, there was only one thing left to see. What would remain once the cold finally let go? The freeze broke on the 7th day. Not all at once, just enough for the air to soften, for engines to start without protest, for pipes that survived to keep surviving. The ranch looked the same as it always had. Snow-packed ground, silent barns, power lines humming steadily like they had nothing to prove. Copper Valley estates looked different. Contractors lined the streets, cutting out burst pipes and hauling away ruined drywall. Temporary heaters roared day and night. Residents asked questions that no longer stopped at polite. And the HOA board stopped answering anything without putting it in writing first. 2 weeks later, the HOA president resigned. No announcement. No explanation. Her name simply vanished from the website, replaced by interim board leadership. People noticed. They always do. The county followed up with a formal report. It confirmed exactly what the records had already shown. My ranch was never community-owned, never shared, never subject to HOA authority. The report also noted that internal HOA documents had mischaracterized adjacent private infrastructure. That's the bureaucratic way of saying they lied. There were consequences, though not the dramatic kind people expect. Fines for code violations, mandatory infrastructure upgrades, a requirement that all future marketing materials remove any claim of shared utilities or external resilience. More importantly, trust was gone. Neighbors who once waved from driveways now asked harder questions at meetings. Board votes weren't rubber-stamped anymore. And every time someone said, "That's how it's always been," someone else replied, "Show me the paperwork." That was the real shift. I never connected my power system to the HOA. Not during the freeze. Not after. I did, however, allow the county to reference my setup as an example of properly permitted independent infrastructure in their emergency planning review. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. One evening, I walked the fence line where the development ended and my land began. The boundary was clearer now, fresh markers, updated county signage, no ambiguity. Just a line that had always existed, finally respected. People still drive past the ranch slowly sometimes. Curious. Recalculating. Understanding, maybe for the first time, that proximity doesn't equal ownership and need doesn't rewrite right. That's the lesson the HOA learned too late. You can call something community-owned long enough that people stop questioning it. You can rely on emergencies, fear, and authority to pressure compliance. But none of that survives a record check. None of it survives someone who stays calm when others panic. Quiet justice doesn't look like revenge. It doesn't make speeches or demand apologies. It just refuses to bend when bending would turn into surrender. At 20 below, they thought the cold would force my hand. Instead, it exposed theirs. And long after the snow melted and the pipes were replaced, one thing remained unchanged: ownership rooted in truth, not desperation. That's how power really works. Not by taking, by standing.